Oh boy, I am no Washingtonian. I wouldn't. I'm not worthy of shining Washington's shoes. Uh, but I thank you for that introduction. And you know, Ames always gives me the opportunity to come here, and I always come here, and I have for the last 4 years to recharge my batteries. I just love hanging out with you guys. Oh, if we could clone you, even in Texas. We were talking just earlier. Why can't we have this in Texas? Why can't we have people of faith and politics and conservatives come together just to be together and talk to each other and fellowship with each other and pray with each other? Now, in Texas, because it is kind of a big state, we probably have to have 5 or 6 of these. But it's pretty tough to get somebody from El Paso to drive to Houston, Texas for the day. But I just greatly appreciate coming here, because what you're doing here is so important. And the other thing is I get to listen to what you're working on and how you're doing it. And you're doing it everything right, and you're moving forward. I've got to give you a little history lesson, because unfortunately, even the Republicans in the House of Representatives and in the United States Senate try to rewrite the history of the Republican majority. Many of you may or may not know, but when I came to Congress in 1985, I was telling somebody, I didn't run for Congress for a job. I ran for Congress to change America. That's a big difference in people, in politicians. I'll never forget, I got to meet Bob Michael, who was the Republican minority leader. And every speech that he would give, particularly to Republicans, he was so proud of the fact that he was the longest serving minority leader in the House of Representatives in history. And he loved it. And of course, the Democrats loved it, because as long as the Republicans remained in the minority and took a little few crumbs off the Democrats' table, then they liked Bob Michael and they liked the Republicans. But there was a bunch of us that came in. In fact, from Texas, we had 6 be elected. One of them was Dick Armey, and others. They called us the Texas Six-Pack. And we didn't come there to be the longest serving minority in the history of the country. We came there to take over. And we were going to change something. And we announced that to the minority leader, and he didn't like it. But one thing led to another, and we sort of moved the minority leader out. It started with, I took over the conservative caucus in the House of Representatives called the Republican Study Committee, which was a small group of real conservatives. And I was chairman of this committee, and I looked at what was going on and how do we move things, how do we do things differently, how do we move our agenda. And it became very evident to me that because the longest serving minority leader never offered the American people an alternative to what the left was doing in the House and the Senate and to our country. Because they would fuzzy, they being the Republican minority, would constantly fuzzy the issue or fuzzy the message or compromise with the Democrats. Well, the Democrats loved that, because the ball was moving in their direction and with the help of the Republicans. So I decided that for everything that the Democrats brought to the floor of the House, the majority brought to the floor of the House, we would have an alternative, a conservative alternative. Every amendment, every bill, everything that we did, we worked very hard, and we had outside resources to help us, to offer, and we did that for 5 long years. And you know what it culminated in? It's called the Contract with America. That's how, because the Contract with America was a clear alternative. We nationalists, Republicans kept saying, all politics are local. We said, no, we're going to nationalize this election in 1994, and we're going to tell the American people that we got 10 things that we promise we'll do if you put us in charge. Um, things like welfare reform, balancing the budget, term limits, all this kind of stuff. And we would bring them to the floor in the first 100 days. Well, we passed all 10 within 73 days. I was the majority whip at the time. But this is the point I'm trying to make. We are almost in the same situation today. Did y'all hear the speech that Obama, I know it was an hour and 6 minutes long, Obama gave last week on the economy and how he was going to turn it around? And the words that he used were very interesting. He used the words social justice. He used the words inequality. He used the words, I'm going to save the middle class, and we're going to rebuild America from the middle class. Isn't it interesting there wasn't one leader from the conservative movement, including Fox News, that did not have an alternative to his speech laying out the freedoms and the constitutional principles that could counter his speech? Nobody gave an alternative. In fact, the Fox News total coverage was over the phony scandals comment. Where's the alternative? Why aren't we offering an alternative? And I got to tell you something, Obama. I am the middle class, and I don't need your help. I don't want your help. I don't need socialism in America. And we got to call it what it is. It's socialism, and we're headed towards communism in this country. And we don't need it, and we've got to counter it. And the only way that you can counter it is to have presented to the American people who we are. And you can start with the Constitution. Just try the Constitution out a little bit. You know, I carry it in my pocket. I know it's been handed out here today. I carry it in my pocket still every day and have for 30 years. And it's become very handy. I remember one time Scalia was, Justice of the Supreme Court, was asking me, Tom, what can we do to better the relationship with those of you across the street? And I pulled out of my pocket the Constitution. I said, well, Tony, maybe you guys ought to start reading this again. Of course, that went over well. I mean, I got to tell you. But let me just give you a couple of, if I have a talent at all, I come up with strategies and ways to do things. But focus on this, give the alternative. You can do it right here in Oregon. We have all these groups here, and I know you work together, and it's wonderful the things you're doing. But let me just suggest to you that we use the Constitution as an alternative. Now, how can you use the Constitution as an alternative? Well, you have an election coming up next year. You're going to have people running for city council, school board. You're going to have people running for Congress, the Senate, and everything. What if each and every individual group in this, under this tent, invited every candidate to come and interview with you? I'm Democrat, Republican, Independent, whoever they are. If their name's going to be on a ballot, invite them to have an interview. I'm not talking about getting in a tent like this. I'm talking about your organization invites them to interview. And what if you laid out the interview is as an oral test, asking them the points of the Constitution, trying to get to them what they know about the Constitution, how it's applied in the Constitution. Are they going to defend the Constitution if they get elected? I guarantee you, if you do that, that will change the whole mindset of those that are elected. It's an incredible phenomenon. I'll tell you how this works. I was elected. I was just a businessman. I killed bugs for a living. I was a pest control operator. Actually, it was a pretty good experience for what I ended up doing. But so I went to the Texas House, and I served a term in the Texas House. And the first week back, I went to my Rotary Club, And the program was these high school students talking about, they were taking a course put on by Carl Skousen on the Constitution. And when they reached certain level, not just reading the Constitution, but applying the Constitution to their lives. And they were learning the Constitution. And when they reached a level, they would get a $250 scholarship. And then they reach another level. The first thing out of this high school student's mouth was, how many amendments are there to the Constitution? I was totally embarrassed. I didn't know the answer. Now, I was a state rep at the time, and I didn't know the answer. So I went and took their course. Now, that is and then I started asking the question. And for the whole time I was in Congress and in the Texas House, I would sort of mingle up to members, and in the course of conversation, I would ask them that question. You know, less than 10% of the members of the United States House of Representatives knew the answer to that question. There is a difference when you are there presenting the alternative and using the Constitution as the alternative. Now, how can that be manifested? And what happens? Well, let's just take a minute. And I'm going to suggest to you that the way you offer an alternative, and the way in every one of your groups, and I've looked at your stuff and your mission statements and what you're all about, and in every one of you are talk about in your mission statements and in your paraphernalia and your propaganda, you talk about you want a constitutionally based government. Well, how are you going to get there? Well, I'm going to tell you how you get there. Shut her down. Shut her down. Now, you could, right now, as we speak, you can shut her down. The biggest issue going on amongst the Republicans in the House and the Senate is to defund Obamacare. It's unconstitutional. Well, I don't care what the Supreme Court. We need to undermine the authority of the Supreme Court. They're not gods. They are wrong. Where in this Constitution, ladies and gentlemen, do you see health care? It ain't there. The federal government has no right to be involved in our health care. None. Now, every Republican that I know of that is now serving in the House and the Senate has voted multiple times to repeal Obamacare. 39? Thank you. 39 times. And I appreciate them constantly bringing it up because it helps with the debate. But if you really want to to get rid of Obamacare, you don't pay for it. And in this Constitution, the House of Representatives has the power of the purse. Use it. The only thing, as long as Obama is president for the next 3.5 years, the only thing that the House of Representatives can accomplish is to zero organizations. You know, when we took over for the first time in 60 years in 1995, and this is what gets me, because the Republicans stand up, we can't shut down the government. It would hurt us politically. Well, I can tell you what. I would rather serve in the minority and stand on principle than be in the majority and give the left everything that they want. Besides, when Karl Rove gets on the television and Karl Rove says it will hurt us politically, what he's saying to you is be a coward. Because the polls will go down, and therefore you have to run from the media and you have to run from the polls. Well, let me tell you something. And then they say, look what happened in 95 when they shut down the government. It was horrible. Well, they're lying to you. Because what we did when we first took over as the majority, most people don't know this, we did not fund over 100 agencies and offices in the federal government. We just didn't write it in the bill. It was zero. You know what? If it's not in the bill that you can spend X number of dollars, you can't spend X number of dollars. It's a very simple concept. And that's how we did it. And guess what? Bill Clinton, President of the United States, vetoed the spending bills. And the government shut down. And we went to the mattresses. That's what we called it. You know, when the mobs are fighting each other, there's a big mob war, they go to the mattresses. We literally lived in the Speaker's office for 21 days fighting that fight. And yes, the polls went down. And we were suffering in the polls because of the fight. Now, if we'd have won the fight, we'd have won the polls. Because the American people could see what was the result of why we were fighting. But on a Sunday afternoon, sometimes the Republicans are our worst enemies. On a Sunday afternoon, I was cooking steaks for some of my members. And I looked up, and Bob Dole, Senator, the majority leader of the Senate, went down to the floor of the Senate and opened the government. And Newt Gingrich said, we can't stop this, so I'm going to go along with him. And they opened up the government. Now, what they don't tell you is that in Clinton's memoirs, he says that if we'd have stayed fighting one more day, he would have caved. Now, what the result was, now they say, oh, it was horrible. The the media was blaming the Republicans and blaming all of us and trying to destroy us. But you know what the result was? First and foremost, Bill Clinton knew that we were crazy. And so therefore, for 6 years, Bill Clinton never got to sign a bill that he initiated. He had to sign bills that we initiated. After vetoing twice the welfare reform bill, he signed it. After vetoing twice the Balanced Budget Act of 1997 that led to a balanced budget, the first one in 100 years, he signed it. And I could go on and on and on. And guess what? In the next election, yeah, we lost a few seats. One of them, I think, was here in Oregon. But we had a bunch of seats with that wake that came to us from the wave of 94 that we really couldn't hold on to. And we lost those seats. And guess what? We gained seats in the Senate. Now, how did we get hurt over fighting the fight? We didn't get hurt. We stood our ground. Now, the Senate didn't. They never stand their ground. America's worst enemy is the Senate. But we stood our ground. We fought the fight. And we won. And guess what? He ultimately signed a bill that eliminated over 100 offices and agencies. We won because we stood on principle and we fought and we used the tools that we had. This is only the beginning. So when you talk to your congressman in Oregon and your two senators, demand that it shut her down. Demand that they shut her down. Because the next fight is shutting her down again. We can not fund Planned Parenthood. We can not fund all these leftist organizations that go out and work against the Republicans that are paid for by the taxpayer. I could go on and on and on. And eventually, maybe, we can not fund all the unconstitutional stuff like Department of Education, Department of Energy, Department of Agriculture, we could go, and eventually, over 10 or 15 years maybe, we'll get back to a constitutional government. So I'm advocating, first and foremost, no matter where you hear it, no matter how you hear it, answer it. Give an alternative. I was talking to Val Esquivel. Did I say it right? Sal, this morning, and we were talking about this very concept in the Oregon legislature, and the fact that they bring each agency to the floor of the Oregon legislature. And I looked at him and I said, well, Sal, then offer a substitute of that agency that you would like to see happening. You may lose the vote, that's fine, but it forces the Oregonians to get into the debate. And what should that agency really look like if you bring conservative principles to that agency? So it works on the state level, it works on the city council level, it works everywhere. Always give it an alternative. And demand of your leaders to stand up and give a philosophical presentation that counters what they're saying. And why are we doing what we're doing, And the ultimate end, and I'll finish with this. Shut her down. Shut her down. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.